Marshawn Lynch is a bad man. He's also probably a terrible coach. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. And today I am going to talk about the subtle art of coaching. And I'm going to discuss the art of coaching by discussing the Marshawn Lynch theory. You could also call this the Michael Jordan theory, or perhaps the Kobe Bryant theory, right? We'll start with the Marshawn Lynch theory and why I think it is so apropos to the subtle nature of coaching. Now, for those of you who don't know, and I'm hoping that if you're listening to this podcast, you are of an age that you would know Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn Lynch was a running back drafted by the Buffalo Bills. I forget the exact year. It was the early 2000s. He eventually went from the Buffalo Bills to the Seattle Seahawks. In Seattle, he became just famous. He became famous for his quickness, for his speed, for his agility, and most importantly, for his power and balance, his ability to fight through tackles and bounce his way off of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people all the way down the field. He was phenomenal for the Seahawks in the mid-2000s, and he set the standard for what running backs who weren't of the name Adrian Peterson were supposed to look like. Supposed to perform. Marshawn Lynch was a beast. In fact, his nickname was Beast Mode. So why do I say the subtle art of coaching has a corollary, or rather is called the Marshawn Lynch theory? Because coaching and playing are two very different skill sets. Now, Marshawn Lynch is a phenomenal running back. Highly skilled. I don't know if he'll make it into the Hall of Fame, in my opinion, for his legendary runs and the memory and the legacy he stamped onto the game. He should be. But I think Marshawn Lynch would make an awful football coach. I don't think he should ever touch a running back room. Why? Because Marshawn Lynch and players like Marshawn Lynch, who are just incredibly good without, I don't say without effort. Marshawn Lynch worked very, very hard, right? He's a pro football player, meaning he was one of the top players in the world, and he got to the position he's in, right? So, without a doubt, he is one of the best players in the world. However, Marshawn Lynch's particular style did not come from a place of deep study of the technical aspects of being a running back. He did a lot of things that would drive a coach crazy. Another example of this in the same vein, let's say, is a LaShawn McCoy. LaShawn McCoy, I do not think would make a great coach either, though he does make a fairly entertaining analyst, because the way Shady, as his nickname was, played the game, it doesn't work for other players. He can't teach people the way he played the game, because the way he played the game was very instinctual. He could cut on, that was a weird face I just made. He could do what they call a cut on a dime. He could, in about 3 inches of space, he could cut back across the field and not lose any speed. That's the kind of instinctual ability that you can't teach. That's just there. And if you have that, well, you don't need to learn that, and you play it to your advantage, and it turns into a technique. The problem is if you go back to try and teach somebody the fundamentals of the game, when you have that instinctual ability, well, how do you teach somebody else something that you've always just known? It's just basically muscle memory for you. Marshawn Lynch's best coaching advice to somebody might be just put your head down and bounce off that guy. But the answer was more complicated than that. Marshawn Lynch had the ability to lower his head and drive, But the way he ran and the way he was able to maintain speed with his hips so low to the ground that if somebody tried to tackle him, unless they got under his shoulder pads, they couldn't take him down, because when he bounced off of somebody, his hips never got high. They never got too high, throwing him off balance. He was always low to the ground, always ready to move, and he was just impossible to bring down until he was already 40 yards down the field. But that wasn't a technique he necessarily had. It was just the way he ran. The best coaches are not star players. Now, Michael Jordan, I've talked about before how he and guys like him and Kobe Bryant, Marshawn Lynch too, I would say, have an obsession with finding that 1,000th rep that takes them to greatness. I've talked about that on a podcast before. But because of that obsession, again, they're finding that 1,000th rep. But they also have great coaches who work with them. Michael Jordan had Phil Jackson. Kobe Bryant, oddly enough, for a time also had Phil Jackson and other coaches. They both also had great supporting casts. You know, Kobe had Shaq, who was another Hall of Fame player. Michael Jordan had, in various forms, he had Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, even sixth man off the bench, who's currently a coach, Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr, and this is a slightly controversial point because I'm comparing the white guy and the African American guy, but Steve Kerr, because he wasn't as good a player as Michael Jordan, he actually makes a much better coach. Why? Because he understands the fundamentals. He may never be able to reach the ceiling of Michael Jordan, but he can teach the fundamentals of the technique, the fundamental techniques that will get you to where you are. It's why he coached the Golden State Warriors' ridiculous dynasty team the last, 5 years of their success. Now, he also had some legendary players, but he also knew how to deploy the assets around those legendary players. He was very similar to a Phil Jackson in his knowledge of how to play to the strengths of the players on his team. And part of that is prepping his guys to play the style he knew they needed to play. Michael Jordan is not a good coach because Michael Jordan can't teach other people the same obsession with the game that he has. And that obsession is what made him great, but also his instinctual ability that came from that obsession, from that ridiculous muscle memory that he just beat into himself. But he started at a much higher floor than guys like Steve Kerr, who had to do more basic stuff to get there. But that knowledge and that basic stuff, that's what makes you the teacher and not the star athlete and not the star player. At the end of the day, teaching is in itself a skill. That skill is usually derived from doing the thing that you're teaching, but it's also derived from having to do the basics of what you're teaching over and over and over again. It's hard to teach somebody a foul shot if you're really good at foul shots. It's hard to teach somebody to shoot three-pointers if you're really good at three-pointers. It's hard to teach somebody how to bounce off a tackle when you're just really good at it. It's hard to teach somebody to cut quickly and keep speed when that's something you're just innately good at. Barry Sanders would probably make a terrible coach. Now, I don't know how good of a coach Deion Sanders is, right? Primetime, because he was a great cornerback. Like, all-time legendary. I don't know that there's ever been a cornerback as good as him. Cornerback, not quarterback. He was legitimately terrifying to see if you were on offense, because he could lock down not even half the field. He could lock down almost the entire field. If I was a cornerback, I would want to sponge off the knowledge that I could get from him. I just don't know how much knowledge I could get from him because prime time was so natural. He just knew. He could see the whole field. His processing speed was incredibly high, and that's the hardest part. when your processing speed works at a certain level, if you don't have that innate processing speed, it takes you a much longer time to get to that level, which is the difference between being starting 5, 6-man. The 6-man is very important. Just the starting 5 is a different level. Some people are great coaches, great teachers. Some people are great players. Don't get the two mixed up. And don't insult teachers by saying it's not a skill, because it is an entire skill set unto itself. And it comes from a deep bed of experience in the thing you're trying to teach. We're a little bit over, but I just want to make this point for actors too. So actors, when you say, oh, well, what's my teacher's, what awards have they won in acting? What significant roles have they had? I don't care what significant roles an acting teacher has had. I care what they know. I care what they can teach me. And honestly, I don't know how good a teacher an Academy Award-winning actor would be. Because a lot of those high-level, super great actors, again, very instinctual, very natural on camera. They may not be able to communicate that to you, and when you try to do it their way, it may not work. Go with the person who knows the technique down and knows how to communicate that technique to you. Anyways, that's my 2 cents. Thanks for listening. If you liked it, drop me a follow. I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a nice day.